Spain's side facing off with a different group. Missed opportunity for a fun little matchup there.
Yeah, it looks like we also had, I think I saw on there, Eduardo Cunha versus Juan Manuel Odriozola on there, which is a very, very exciting matchup. Obviously, we cannot feature every match every week, but that seems like a really, really interesting matchup. Maybe one that is pivotal. A lot of the time, it's in these matchups, it could often be like, how do your best players get on in their matches? If you can get a big win against your opponent's best player, for example, that can be a real boost to your team. But when you've got two of your best players playing against each other, it can be a very, very tricky match.
Yeah, and I think especially then, it's important for each team to establish an early lead so that these two players facing off with such incredible skill sets have a little bit less of that pressure on them. So definitely some extra reason for these two players to be able to try to secure a win for their team.
Those are not the two players that we are looking at for our first match today. Let's have a quick look at who we are featuring, starting off with Portugal's Ruben Pereira, running a team that we've seen a few times before in a couple of different iterations. It's been popular in the NA, it's been popular in Europe as well. Pretty standard composition, but one that is very, very threatening.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, I think, very similar to Nicholas Donnelly's composition. Lots of really exciting things to point out here. A few small adjustments, some really powerful Tailwind and Trick Room modes. We should also mention, it would be remiss of us not to, that Ruben Pereira has a wide range of accomplishments. Some World Cup top 16 in the past with Portugal, so no stranger to the team. A top 16 at Harrogate Regional, the Bilbao Special Event top 8, and the Liverpool Regional top 32. So a lot of like regional top cuts, no stranger to the scene, going back for quite a while, and well versed in this team, especially of Portugal.
And as you pointed out, World Cup top 16, they got knocked out last year. They're looking to get their improve on their result from last year as well. It feels a bit rough sometimes going out the same stage twice in a row. So a lot to fight for here. And like I said, there are a couple of interesting things to point out on the team as well here. We see Iron Hands, a Pokemon that in the last few formats we've seen it be legal. It's often been running an Assault Vest. It's been a bit more a defensive piece next to Miraidon. This time round though, no such issues with defense. It's all offense, Clear Amulet and close combat. And that Clear Amulet may end up being very, very helpful into the Incineroar that we see on the side of Martín Pena.
Yeah, Martín Pena running a team that we saw, I believe, most recently from Scott Iwafuchi, getting top 4 at the Vancouver Regional Championships. A really nice Amoonguss Incineroar support core, which allows for a lot of intimidates on, say, the Ogerpon on Ruben's side of the field, but not, as you've mentioned, that Iron Hands, because it has that Clear Amulet. Going to be pretty helpful for landing some powerful attacks into this side of the field. There's also the Goldengo, Porygon 2, Landorus, and Roaring Moon, so a very slow defensive Trick Room option, some abilities to support the Goldengo, and also some abilities to hit fast and hard, as is so often necessary in Regulation F, with that Sheer Force Landorus, and the Roaring Moon crucially featuring that Dragon Dance ability for some further setup rather than anything like a Tailwind.
It's going to be a tough matchup, I think, for Martin, because with the Iron Hands on the opposing team, it's very difficult to leverage that Trick Room mode. Obviously, Amoonguss would be a threat to it, but Iron Hands is running Terra Grass on Ruben's team, allowing it to ignore Spores, ignore Rage Powders, and like we said before, with the Clear Amulet, it does mean Incineroar can't slow it down quite as quickly, and outside of Trick Room, there's the Tailwind option as well from Ruben. So Martin's going to be looking to try and get an advantage in the speed war here, and that is probably going to be very tricky, but we'll see how he's able to tackle that going into our Game 1, which we now have ready for you.
Absolutely. So jumping into this Game 1, the leads are going to be really crucial. It looks like it's a Goldengo and Incineroar mode from Martin, and that Urshifu, Dark, and Tornadus. So a lot of offense from that Urshifu that would have made a Porygon 2 lead pretty difficult for Martin to pull off. And then it looks like Ruben's going with that Tailwind option on that Tornadus.
Yeah. We see no Trick Room mode, as we mentioned, coming out from Martin. The Iron Hands may be a little bit too scary. There is the Tailwind option to get around maybe Roaring Moon lead. Tornado's probably not positioned that well here. It can't go for any taunts or anything into the Goldengo thanks to the Good as Gold ability, but Urshifu is very, very threatening on Ruben's side. There is the Fake Out on board from this Incineroar, but there is a Farigiraf you need to worry about in the back here. We do see a switch, but it doesn't look like it's going to be that Farigiraf.
Just that Iron Hands piece that you mentioned being so crucial earlier, it threatens a ton of damage into that Incineroar and is perfectly happy to take something like a Make It Rain. We're going to see Goldengo respecting that option from the Urshifu of a Wicked Blow, going to go ahead and become a Fairy Terrestrialization type. a lot more comfortable in this particular matchup. Now, as the close combat does fire off into the Incineroar, that Intimidate earlier, being able to keep the Incineroar up, it's going to be able to eat its Citrus Berry here, and it's going to potentially have an opportunity to Parting Shot out, or to maybe break the Focus Sash on that Urshifu Dark. It is that Parting Shot option, so going to... Oh! Because of the Clear Amulet on Iron Hands, Incineroar not able to reposition as a Make It Rain goes out, leaving the Urshifu up and the Iron Hands in pretty comfortable HP range.
Martin, I think, very much expecting the Frigoraph to be the switch in there, but as you said, Iron Hands pretty comfortable taking that Make It Rain, and now Incineroar is stuck on the field. It doesn't have access to Terastallization as well, and notably, the only fighting immunity on the team here in Golden Go has just used its Terastallization, and obviously cannot switch in on that Incineroar slot, so this is potentially a swing from the Urshifu into the Incineroar slot. Golden Go also opening it up to potentially a Heavy Slam from this Iron Hands now that it's gone for that Terra Fairy. There are some defensive pivots in the back for fighting type moves here. You've got the Landorus, you've got Amoonguss in the back potentially to resist fighting type moves. But we're not going to see one come out. Instead, Ruben choosing to go for a slightly more passive play on that side, bring in the Tornadoes.
Yeah, I think it's useful to keep that Urshifu around and not have it just go down to a Make It Rain now, so maybe that's sort of on Ruben's mind. We're also going to see the Amoonguss pivoting in, so if that Urshifu had tried to finish off the Incineroar, the Rocky Helmet on that Amoonguss would have taken that Urshifu out instead. Gholdengo, recognizing that it was at lowered special attack from the previous Make It Rain, is going to go ahead and boost up to +1 special attack, but it does have to take that Heavy Slam you mentioned, which is an extraordinary amount of damage, especially with that Parting Shot not being able to go off. That Iron Hands is at full attack, and now this Gholdengo, because the Tornadus has pivoted in, if Tornadus has enough speed to outspeed Gholdengo's, as I would imagine it does, it's now just threatening a KO with Bleak Wind Storm, and also quite a bit of damage on that Amoonguss.
Yeah, the Tornado switch in there is very smart from Ruben, identifying that Amoonguss is one of those Pokemon that could come in on a fighting type move, and in fact is more likely to than Landorus because Amoonguss can heal off that damage with its Regenerator ability. And saying, okay, well, I don't want you to get a free switch into your Amoonguss, so I'm going to bring in my Pokemon that can hit a 100 base power spread flying type attack. And now, as you said, this Bleak Wind Storm is threatening a KO on Golden Go and Amoonguss, thanks to that big Heavy Slam damage that came out prior. And now we are going to see the Terastallization from Ruben's side. He's been holding on to that for this game so far, and we're going to see this Terra Grass, meaning that Iron Hands is now suddenly a lot less worried about any Spores or Rage Powders that Amoonguss could be firing off.
Yeah, really important given that the Incineroar can't slow down that Iron Hands. Oh, but the Bleak Wind Storm misses! That means Gholdengo's going to have a chance to go for a +1 special attack, Make It Rain. There's going to be a ton of damage to that Tornadus, and because the Iron Hands terastallized out of the Steel resistance, that's just a double KO. What a huge miss from that Tornadus that completely flips this matchup.
That's always the gamble you take when you're clicking Bleak Wind Storm. It's 80% accurate, which means that 1 in 5 times you are going to miss that attack, and now we see the consequences of that, with Martin able to take out both Pokemon at the same time with that +1 Make It Rain. And I think Ruben maybe got a little bit trigger happy with the Terastallization there. Yes, the Grass Terastallization is nice to avoid the Amoonguss being able to hit you with Spore or Rage Powder, for example, but there was also the option of maybe just going for Bleak Wind Storm and Heavy Slam into Amoonguss without burning the Terastallization immediately. Just because that way, if you hit either Pokemon with the Bleak Wind Storm, you get some value, whereas now you're putting all your eggs in that basket of hitting the Golden Go, which, as we saw, did not pay off. And now we see Amoonguss able to leverage its very strong defensive capabilities in front of these two big attackers.
Yeah, Amoonguss forcing a Protect from the Urshifu. Urshifu had no safe way to attack without proccing that Rocky Helmet to be able to feint, so it's just going to go for a Protect, as Ursaluna has to tank a huge Make It Rain, but does get a double KO for its troubles, going for that Hyper Voice. So we are now down to 2-2, with the Urshifu just at 1 hit point, and the Incineroar on Martin's side also pretty low. So it's going to really matter what that last Pokemon is from Martin's side. There's going to be an opportunity to have some fake out pressure into this Urshifu that's just protected, so that's going to be quite impactful. But it is just the Porygon 2 at the end. So I think Martin's in a pretty good spot here because that Ursaluna is so low. But definitely, if this Urshifu can land a double protect, that's going to make things a little bit harder for him as he closes up this end game.
Potentially, but Martin does have the option just to go for a fake out into Ruben's Urshifu here and set up the Trick Room. Now that the Iron Hands is down on Ruben's side, that's no longer a problem. Ursalunas with the Life Orb item, especially on a team with Tailwind, normally train to be quite a bit faster. So if Porygon 2 can get up the Trick Room here. This does look pretty good, but we see a double protect coming out from the Urshifu, keeping it on the field for one more turn. Blood Moon coming out from Ursaluna into Porygon 2 isn't enough to get the KO. Let's see what the Porygon 2 goes for here. Is it Trick Room? It's just Ice Beam, opting instead to get the KO on the Ursaluna, which goes down, and now it's just a 1 HP Urshifu against 2 Pokemon here. Urshifu only having access to single target attacks. All Martin has to do here is attack with both of his Pokemon, and that should be game 1 wrapped up.
Absolutely. I'm curious if that Ursaluna still had the Terrestrialization up. If the Iron Hands hadn't burned Terrestrialization, maybe that Blood Moon would have been close to a KO. But it looks like Porygon 2 would have survived either way. And yeah, Martin just proving that it didn't matter if the double protect came up, because sure, the Porygon 2 goes down, but all Incineroar has to do is click any attacking move of its choice into this 1 HP Urshifu, and we'll be moving on to game 2 with Martin game up.
There's maybe a bit of information to be learned there for Ruben, though, seeing that the double up of that Blood Moon with the Life Orb and the Wicked Blow was able to KO the Porygon 2. Maybe that's something he can use in future games. But I think Martin did a very good job in that match of identifying what was stopping the Trick Room mode, getting rid of that Iron Hands early. And I wonder if maybe Ruben gave him a bit of a hand with getting rid of the Iron Hands there, because I think without the Grass Terrestrialization, Golden Go is going to really struggle to break through the Iron Hands. An Amoonguss can hit it with Sludge Bomb and Pollen Puff after it goes for a Terra Grass anyway, so I think the Terra Grass there does help you avoid one Spore, but as we saw, if you miss the Bleakwind Storm, or if Amoonguss just goes for a Sludge Bomb there instead, that doesn't really help you very much. And once that Iron Hands was down, that was when Martin said, okay, I'm going to bring in my slow, bulky Porygon 2. Didn't even need to set up Trick Room in the end, but had the option there if he wanted it, and that was enough to seal up the game.
Yeah, I think that you've absolutely identified the most critical turn and the critical Terrestrialization choice. Having that Terra Grass, Iron Hands, burning the Terrestrialization, and making itself more vulnerable to the Make It Rain was really critical. I think it sort of seemed like Ruben just had to guess which Bleakwind Storm miss was the more impactful to cover. You could either cover Bleakwind missing the Amoonguss and then Iron Hands going to sleep, or you could cover Bleakwind Storm missing the Goldengo and trying to survive the Make It Rain, and just happened to guess wrong on which miss to cover. And then from there, that just made it so difficult to come back. I think equally, if it had been no Terrestrialization, but the Bleakwind Storm had missed the Amoonguss and the Amoonguss then survived the Heavy Slam, having a sleeping Iron Hands would also have been pretty impactful. So I think just a tough gamble for how to control the odds that then gave Martin a good option to get back into this game.
The question now is, how does Ruben deal with this Terra Fairy Golden Go? Looking at the teams here, the Terra Fairy specifically does make that Golden Go very difficult to get through. I wonder if we now see the Ogerpon, for example, making appearance in this game too, as a way of dealing damage to the Ogerpon, obviously threatening it with super effective Ivy Cudgel when it is not Terrestrialized, but when it's Terrestrialized, you're still hitting it for big neutral damage. But again, this lead of Incineroar Golden Go does allow Martin to shut down any potential Ogerpon lines with that Intimidate ability, with Incineroar able to sit in front of it quite comfortably. Instead, though, we do see Iron Hands on lead here. Not really worried about either of the Pokemon on Martin's side. Golden Go can only really hit it with a Shadow Ball, not boosted by its Metal Coat item. Incineroar's Intimidate, not doing anything here. And if Golden Go does go for a Terrestrialization here, there is always an option for this Iron Hands to maybe go for a Fake Out if Ruben is feeling particularly daring on turn 1.
Yeah, I really like this from Ruben. The Iron Hands had to pivot in anyways the previous time with this lead matchup, and so just starting with a little bit more tempo, not needing to pivot out of Tornadus, I think gives a lot more options here. That Iron Hands is certainly on a couple of levels preventing that Goldengo from being able to safely Terrestrialize with the Heavy Slam and even the Fake Out. We are actually going to see a different switch from Ruben this time than last time, though. Going to pivot out that Urshifu Dark, reset the attack stat on it, and pivot in that Ogerpon, which you mentioned might come to this game. So now that Ogerpon has gotten in without any Intimidate drops, and with that Incineroar stuck on the field, that might be really useful for breaking through this Goldengo. Although we do see that Terrestrialization coming out right away from Martin, still feeling pressured by that Urshifu Dark that just left the field.
It's just we are going to see the Fake Out not into the Urshifu slot, and indeed we do see Fake Out into Iron Hands and a nasty plot coming up from Golden Go on Martin's side. I think that's a reasonably safe play, because if Ruben stays in with the Urshifu, it's not doing very much into a Terra Fairy Golden Go. You're still able to get that nasty plot up, and Martin assessing that Farigiraf's probably not coming to this game. We didn't see it in game 1, I think, in terms of adjustments for Ruben in game 2. Martin can probably assume Farigiraf is not what Ruben wants to be bringing, given that he struggled so much into the Golden Go Obviously, Frigoraph not really able to hit that for any real damage. It just kind of sits in front of it. So that's a nice play from Martin, knowing how Ruben played in turn 1, trying to preserve that Urshifu, trying to not bring that Frigoraph because he has other options he'd prefer, and capitalizing on that on turn 1. And now this Golden goes in a very strong position.
Golden goes in a strong position, but it does have to face down this Ogerpon, which is going to lock in a Terrestrialization. With Incineroar on the field, it doesn't have to worry about any Intimidates just yet. So it's going to go ahead and boost up that attack stat. It's threatening quite a bit of damage here with that Ivy Cudgel option, boosted by both the Terrestrialization and the attack boost. And it is just going to go
protect
right
from
away.
the Golden Go.
Golden Go risking this very much and is just going to go down. Even at +2 special attack, doesn't matter if you cannot attack. And that's the first KO of the match in Ruben's favor here. And most of the damage from Martin's last set of 4 now is completely gone, as just a knockoff goes into that clear amulet. Iron Hands.
The close combat's going to come out now, and that should be a KO on the instant as well. Yeah, Martin losing both of his lead Pokemon. That critical hit, I'll tell you right now, does not matter. Iron Hands without that attack drop thanks to its clear amulet. 120 base power with same type attack bonus, super effective. Even Incineroar is not going to be bulky enough to survive that one. And I think Martin just left himself far too open to that play. It does seem a bit obvious to protect Golden Go in that situation, and maybe he was hoping that Ruben would maybe read a bit too hard into that. But even in that situation, surely you'd expect you want to maybe get a parting shot off of the Ogerpon, for example. Maybe he was calling that the Ogerpon would protect as well, calling his protect. But you want to try and surely parting shot off of Ogerpon there. Get rid of that attack boost so that you can then bring bring Incineroar back in to intimidate it again. And then you can allow your Golden Go to start attacking a little bit more. Instead, we see the forfeit locked in from Martin. That game 2 went very, very quickly. And I think both games we've seen players take big risks. And both times we've seen them get punished pretty severely with a double KO in both cases, actually. So I wonder if we see a slightly more conservative game plan from both players going into this game 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all really revolved around whether or not this Goldengo gets powerful attacks off. In the first game, it was the Goldengo having that opportunity to dodge an attack and get off the +1 Make It Rain. In the second game, it was the Goldengo getting perhaps a little greedy with going for that Make It Rain when it was under so much pressure. Although, I did want to say, you can see, I think, some of the thinking behind Martin's choice there. It was very much a choice that Ruben was running right up to the clock trying to make of whether that Ogerpon goes for a Terrestrialization and a big attack now versus trying to maybe keep that grass typing around for if an Amoonguss comes in so that its attacks can't be redirected, or trying to maybe Spiky Shield if Ruben had been expecting a protect and parting shot like you mentioned. So definitely some reasons why Martin might have been trying to take this as an opportunity to go for a big read, especially being up a game, but it absolutely backfired, and Ruben definitely made the right call there, just getting a double KO, and that was a two-round game, just very convincing from Ruben there.
As you said, Martin being a game up does give him a bit more license to go for reads like that, right? That's maybe not a play you'd make if you're a game down instead, so he does still have an extra game to play with. And frankly, it's been a while since we've played Regulation F. We've not really seen these offensive Ogerpon builds in a while. I forgot just how much damage that thing did. Terrifier and +1, that Ivy Cudgel is getting a one-shot on that Golden Go straight off the bat. I thought maybe for a second it might have been a critical hit, but nope. Don't even need the crit for that KO. So I like the adjustment from Ruben to bring the Ogerpon, because that is a very, very strong tool into that Golden Go. I want to see now if there's any adaptation again from both sides, or if maybe Martin wants to just change how he played into the Pokemon that Ruben brought.
Yeah, because I think Ruben found the perfect 4 Pokemon to bring into this matchup, swapping out the Tornadus for that really powerful attacker in the Ogerpon, and also getting another Steel-type resistance for the Make It Rains, I think just gives so much flexibility for how to handle this game plan. Whereas on Martin's side, I'm not sure that this Porygon 2 has really been doing very much of anything so far. It's maybe like super useful if there's a Tailwind setup, or maybe for wrapping up an end game, but so far it's really just come in at moments when the game was kind of already decided, and any Pokemon would have had the same effect. So there's definitely some license for Martin to be able to maybe try a few other directions of Pokemon to bring into this last game.
Yeah, you could possibly see some of those Pokemon swapped out in the end game. Maybe if you're worried about the Ogerpon, it could be a Roaring Moon that we see, but we are just going to see the same leads again from both players. Both players deciding, okay, the lead wasn't the problem, it was what happened afterwards. So now the question is, how do these players change up what they do in these early turns? Is Martin maybe gonna avoid going for a fake out, worried about Farigiraf in the back? Is there maybe a switch out from a Pokemon that didn't switch out the first time round? There's a lot of variations that can be played with this combination of leads.
Yeah, I think both players bringing the same Pokemon is really not very indicative of how this first turn is actually going to go. There are so many different plays, different fake out targets for Martin. You still have to worry about maybe like a switch up to a third game Farigiraf. But then if that Goldengo is able to make it through this turn with a nasty plot boost again, there's just so many options for Martin to play from there. So there's a ton of pressure, I think, from that side with the fake out nasty plot that Ruben's going to have to figure out how to respond to.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with Farigiraf, is so often it can be scary enough on team preview to stop your opponent doing certain plays. Because we saw the fake out last time. And so Martin might be thinking, okay, well, he wants to avoid that this time. But instead, we don't see any switches from either player. But we do still see the fake out coming out from this Incineroar. And we see a Wicked Blow from Urshifu coming out into Incineroar here, maybe trying to read a switch very aggressively there on the close combat that came out last time. But we do see the reward for Martin, just that nasty plot on his Terra Fairy Goldengo. Urshifu in a slightly strange position now. We've got the same call as we had in game 1 of, does this Incineroar stay in to take the close combat? Or is there a switch into maybe a Rocky Helmet Amoonguss that could break the Focus Sash on this Urshifu? I think Urshifu now, getting that call wrong on turn 1 puts the Urshifu in a very, very difficult spot on Ruben's side.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. It's still set up, I believe, the KO with close combat into the Incineroar, but there's still that worry about a switch. I think the Wicked Blow is maybe trying to catch the Amoonguss the previous turn, and so we're going to see, Ruben's having to hover a much more defensive play on this Urshifu. We are going to see the pivot, just as you called out from that Incineroar. It is actually the Landorus, a different close combat resist. So Martin has actually switched things up quite a bit this game, bringing that much more powerful special attacker relative to what I got to. Goldengo going for a Protect, probably wanting to avoid this Heavy Slam, which Iron Hands is going to fire off into that Protect. So I think that nothing has happened necessarily on the board, no damage has been dealt, but getting that Landorus in is so crucial because it means this Iron Hands goes from being the incredibly influential threat it was in the first 2 games to being something that is very much threatened by a KO either before Terrestrialization from the Earth Power or potentially after the Terrestrialization from the Sludge Bomb from that Landorus.
Exactly, this is a really good pin from Martin. Able to, like you said, threaten the Iron Hands whether or not it goes to that Terrestrialization. Iron Hands also not running Protect, it cannot defend itself. And I don't think there's really anything on Ruben's team that's going to be able to take the combination of Make It Rain and Earth Power. That Earth Power is going to come out now. Iron Hands dropping immediately. Landorus, one of the strongest offensive Pokemon in the game. That super effective Earth Power easily taking out Landorus. We are going to see the Wicked Blow now come out from Urshifu, and it's not enough to pick up the Landorus. Make It Rain now going to hit Urshifu down to its Focus Sash. And it looks like the speed advantage is still in Martin's favor with that Landorus threatening this Urshifu, which is a huge advantage here because even if there is a Tornadus in the back, which we see that there is, you can set Tailwind up here, but Urshifu can only hit one Pokemon at a time. Instead, we are going to see now this Ogerpon coming out from Ruben.
Yeah, so speed advantage was in Martin's favor, but potentially not, depending on how this Ogerpon is trained now. So a nice switch in from Ruben. There's also, I think, the pressure of a Sucker Punch from that Urshifu Dark. So even if this Ogerpon is maybe adamant and the Landorus is timid, there's still the opportunity to pressure it and prevent it from going for an easy amount of damage. This Ogerpon, of course, does threaten the same KO it threatened last time, but the situation's a little bit different because that Incineroar is still in the back with a fair amount of health. So pivoting in Intimidate and maybe going for something like a Protect on the Goldengo gives a lot of options to try to buy a little bit of time for this Goldengo to get set up a little later.
Yeah, it is a really tough call here for Ruben, because I think your options here are either that you go for the Ivy Cudgel into Goldengo and double it down with a Wicked Blow as well if you're calling this Incineroar switching in, which it looks like it might be. But if you let the Landorus swing, then you might just lose your Ogerpon or Urshifu before it's able to attack. We do see the Incineroar coming in, the Intimidate going down on this Ogerpon. Urshifu doesn't care about it quite as much, but it is now at -2 thanks to the Incineroar lead, so there's a chance that maybe this Incineroar still survives this hit. But instead we see the cool Ivy Cudgel coming out into Incineroar. That's definitely now in range of a close combat, or it would be if it weren't for the Citrus Berry. So now this close combat, I think we saw, is going to come out into Incineroar. Is it enough to pick up the KO? It is, and Incineroar goes down, and now that is a big threat, or not a threat necessarily, but a big obstacle for this Ogerpon taken off the field.
Yeah, that's huge that that close combat was still able to land the KO. I thought with the Citrus Berry that it might not have been a KO, but being able to take that Incineroar out is huge because it means that there's no longer this fake out pressure for the easy way to knock out the Urshifu. And this Urshifu is really managing to just put out a lot of pressure. You don't have to have any more than one hit point to do damage, and this Urshifu is doing a really good job of controlling the things that could outspeed it and KO it otherwise, whether with priority in Incineroar's case, or with the Landorus just being so low that it has to worry about Sucker Punches. So a lot rides now on Martin's choice of the last Pokemon to bring in. Because this Ogerpon didn't Terrastalize, I don't think an Amoonguss is as nice of an option as it normally would be because it can't actually redirect attacks from the Ogerpon.
It is the Amoonguss coming in here, though, and I think with the Intimidate, Ogerpon might have to Terrastalize to try and get a KO on Amoonguss here, and even if it does, you're now left swinging with Urshifu into the Golden Go, which isn't a great situation. So this is actually quite a nice position, I'd say, for Martin, where this Amoonguss is forcing the Urshifu, or potentially forcing the Urshifu to hit into it with its Rocky Helmet, which will KO the Urshifu. Ogerpon can maybe try and switch out here to reset that Intimidate and start firing off big attacks next turn. But if you do that and Golden Go clicks Make It Rain, that's 2 KOs for free, and Ogerpon I do not think would ever have the firepower to win a 3v1 by itself, no matter how strong it is. So this is a very good position, I still think, for Martin. There's a very big, potentially Shadow Ball or Make It Rain coming out from this Golden Go in the next turn or two. And if Ruben cannot reposition now, this Ogerpon is going to stay intimidated for the rest of this game.
This game has so much revolve around whether the Goldengo is able to get off powerful attacks, and this is the pivotal turn to see whether it's able to. Ogerpon is going for that Terrastalization, as you mentioned, to negate the earlier Intimidate and set up a Terra Boost on this Ivy Cudgel. It's going to be able to go without any redirection into this Amoonguss, and that's still a KO, even with the Intimidate drops. So that takes Amoonguss out right away. Means that Urshifu isn't going to be knocking itself out on any Rocky Helmets, but it also isn't going to be doing a ton of damage with this Wicked Blow into the Fairy type Goldengo. Enough chip that I think this Goldengo might have to now worry about an Ivy Cudgel KO, as it did before. The Make It Rain does pick up the KO on this pesky Urshifu and bring the Ogerpon fairly low, but not enough that it would necessarily be a 2-hit KO because of the special attack drop that the Goldengo gets from that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Golden Go now potentially in range of an Ivy Cudgel is the key here. We saw the +1 Ivy Cudgel was enough to KO the Golden Go in the previous game. So it's doing a minimum of about 2/3 with the Intimidate drop on it. And now it's a case of, is that enough to pick up the KO? If it is, Tornadus can probably take out the Landorus from here with a Bleak Wind Storm. And Landorus can't really threaten Tornadus that hard, thanks to the fact that Earth Power is obviously not effective at all on flying types. Ruben may have to call here if this Golden Go is going to protect this turn on Martin's side, or if Martin's going to opt to attack with the Golden Go. So it's a bit of a tough call here. If Landorus can get an attack off into Ruben's Ogerpon and take it out this turn, Golden Go could be able to take it home against the Tornadus.
Yeah, a lot of pressure on this turn, but Ruben, I think, very cleverly is going to sidestep a lot of this pressure around getting safe targeting into the Ogerpon. It's just going to buy a little bit of time protecting the Ogerpon and going for an attack with the Tornadus. Landorus on Martin's side is going to reciprocate, also protecting itself from a powerful attack from this Tornadus. So neither side taking a ton of damage, but that Bleak Wind Storm taking that Goldengo not quite within range of another Bleak Wind Storm, but pretty close. Goldengo does...
Neither side taking a ton of damage yet. Tornadus does have enough to hang on, though. If that was a Make It Rain with the Metal Coat, maybe that would have been enough to take out the KO on Tornadus. Instead, it is still on the field, able to click more Bleak Wind Storms. There's also the case of, is Ogerpon faster than the Landorus? It looks like it is, based on the fact that it did go for Spiky Shield before Landorus protected last turn, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. So that's a big mark in favor of Ruben. Landorus going for the double protect, not able to get it. The Ivy Cudgel is going to come out. Where is it going to land?
So to that Landorus, that's a guaranteed KO, but it does open up an opportunity for another attack from this Goldengo. It has to really get a KO, and I think both Pokemon right now for it to be able to do anything, but with the single target Bleak Wind Storm, that's just going to be a KO. Goldengo dodged it in Game 1, but it wasn't able to dodge it in Game 3, and that's going to wrap things up in Ruben's favor here.
Ruben's Tornado is saying, sorry boss, didn't mean to miss in Game 1, I'm not making that mistake again. Landing all of his Bleak Wind Storms this time around, and that is enough, as you said, with the single target damage to take out the Golden Go. I wonder if maybe if that Landorus had got that double protect off, Would that Bleak Storm have been enough to take out the Golden Go? And if not, it looked like that Make It Rain would have been enough to get the double KO. So I do like that play from Martin, understanding what his way out of that game was. And in fact, he gave himself multiple ways of getting out of that game. If the Ogerpon is targeting down that Landorus slot, either a double protect on the Landorus or a miss from a Bleak Storm would allow that Golden Go to fire off a big Make It Rain. So a good job by Martin identifying what his best chances were, giving yourself multiple opportunities to try and get out of that game, to the point where I think the odds were probably about 50-50 on that last turn. But this time falling in favor of Ruben. Unlike game 1 where that Bleak Storm miss did cost him a lot, this time around Tornadus has got his glasses on, he's not missing in this instance, and that is going to be the first set wrapped up in Portugal's favor.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really fun things about a best of 3 is something can go just a little bit wrong in game 1 and totally mess up an otherwise really strong game plan, and we get to see the players sometimes deciding just to keep going with it, to keep playing the odds, and Tornadus did finally pull through with that Bleak Storm. That was a really fun endgame to look at, though, as you mentioned, all of the probability balancing that Martin was doing, and also I think figuring out the speed orders was so crucial, because if that Landorus had been a little bit faster than the Tornadus, that was like a huge risk for maybe being able to KO first. And so I think both players just had to do a lot of thinking about how to manage an uncertain speed order for quite a few Pokemon, and it made it like a really interesting and nuanced endgame.
It is interesting because that speed order between Landorus and Ogerpon, there's a real chance that it was only ambiguous from one side, right?
Yeah.
So you can train an Ogerpon to always be faster than every Landorus. And so if that is the case, then Ruben knows that and Martin doesn't. So he's working with a bit of an informational advantage. And I think he did a good job of leveraging that as well. Because at no point throughout the entire set did we ever see that speed interaction until the very end when it was most relevant. So I think that was a nice piece of information management. Even in these open team sheets formats that we play at the moment, there is still a lot of information about your Pokemon, and especially how they're trained, that you can withhold.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also super curious about the Tornadus versus the Landorus. The Tornadus certainly could have been faster, but based on Ruben's targeting, I think maybe Ruben wasn't confident about that. Taking the KO on the Landorus before it can move, and making sure the Tornadus has a chance to go for a single target Bleak Storm, versus trying to just target down the Goldengo and have the Tornadus deal with the Landorus. I thought that was an interesting targeting choice. Just a lot of ways that players are leveraging what they do know over their opponent, and kind of playing cautious about the elements that they might not be as sure of.
Yeah, especially in those Rocky Helmet Tornado sets, a lot of the time you are going to be running a bit less speed investments. There's a good chance that Landorus will be going faster than you. But speaking of going fast, we're maybe taking a little bit too long on this outro section for this game. We've got 4 more games still to run through that we are excited to bring you. So we are going to take a very quick break, but we will be back with our second match very shortly. So do not go anywhere.